Stop there and let me correct it. I wanna live a life in a new perspective. You come along because I love your face, and you admire my expensive taste. And who cares, divine intervention? I wanna be praised from a new perspective. Leaving now would be a good idea. So catch me up and getting out of here. So catch me up and getting out of here. So, as you might have been able to guess from me horribly cribbing on Brandon Urie's song for Samantha's Body, which I've never seen, so roast me in the comments, today's tag is called the New Perspective tag. And I don't even know why I'm holding up my bullet journal, because that's not the notebook I need. So I basically came up with 5 questions, and you could do this as a challenge, maybe. I'm not sure how you would, but if you want to try doing this as a challenge, I definitely give you all the support for that. But this is really more about books that you have already read. And so, essentially, the point of the New Perspective tag is that I made a bunch of questions, and you basically just want to choose books or series or authors that really changed your mind about something, or showed you something from a perspective that you weren't inspecting. Perspective you were not expecting. I can say words. That's the thing I do today. Yes. Anyway, question number 1 is talk about a book that is from a different perspective than your own. Now, this could mean a lot of different things. So if you're going to choose a book from it, I definitely recommend this is a great opportunity to read more diverse authors. So read something from LGBT if you're a straight person, or read something from a person of color if you're not a person of color, or if from a different race or ethnicity or culture or religion or anything like that. Basically, try to find a narrative that is from a different perspective than your own, that can really help you understand something from that side of it. And you can be it doesn't just have to be about demographics or identities or anything like that. For instance, you could read a memoir by a person in a different political stance than yours, or you could read a historical book that's from a different perspective in history than you're normally accustomed to. For instance, as an American, it'd be a different perspective for me to read a book centered in the World Wars that was set from Japan or Germany or Russia, because I have a very US-centric idea of those wars. And so, it's just something like that. You want to read a book that tells you a story that you're not accustomed to. So, the book I chose, and yeah, I feel like a little bit of a douche for picking an AP Lit book, but I really enjoyed the impact it had on me when I read it. And so I chose Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, and hopefully I pronounced this incorrectly. I apologize if I did not. And so Things Fall Apart, I read it when I took AP Lit my senior year of high school, and it is, I'm going to say world literature, though I always feel that term is a bit biased. It's just, all literature is world literature. It's just not from a traditional Western European perspective, I guess. But that is neither here nor there, and we can discuss the problematic phrases that we use to describe different cultures in another video. Not this video, and probably no video, because I don't like talking about this stuff because it's boring and trite. Point being, Things Fall Apart is the story of, I can't remember the name of the protagonist anymore, but essentially it deals with this African tribe in Niger who is basically dealing with the effects of colonialization. And it's told from the perspective of this, I'm not really sure how to describe him. I would really call him sort of the everyday man of this culture. He's very traditional, he's very set in his ways, and he very much expounds sort of the traditional mores of the society that he's in. But throughout the book, while he's also being challenged by different perspectives and ideas, he's also dealing with different personalities of the colonizers. One thing I really loved was there was, through about halfway through the book, there was the introduction of missionaries, Christian missionaries into his society. And so it was really interesting because on one hand they were dealing with different cultures, namely Europeans, but they were also dealing with a completely different religious idea, this sort of monotheistic Catholicism, which is very different from animistic religions or polytheistic religions, and so it is a very different sort of spiritual structure. And so their culture's own beliefs and superstitions also clash with the newcomers' beliefs and superstitions. And so it's really interesting to see how those two interacted. One thing I loved was, because I like to have, I am a fairly religious person. I don't practice enough of my faith to really consider myself, I guess, religious in that sense, but I do have a lot of background in it. It's something that I do think about a lot. Theology is an interest of mine, if intellectually, if not spiritually. And so I think it was really interesting was how they actually dealt with religion in that book. And this is just part, and religion and politics and all that is just one more facet of social, constructs. But basically they had one character, one priest, who was integrating his beliefs with theirs. He was trying to find this common ground where they could have a spiritual conversation. But then they would have another priest who comes later who is very assimilatory. They want to basically make their beliefs his beliefs, even though they are very non-compatible. And that's not to say that it's constantly non-compatible. There are always through lines when it comes to religious and spiritual beliefs. There is always a general moral code. And so there is a way to connect and empathize with people even if you're unable to agree on the small details. And so I thought it was interesting that they do have that nuance. And they had a lot, and there's a lot of nuance in the book. There was a lot of scenes that they showed that really explained hey, this might be different, but there is a difference. And one thing was, I think, was them discussing domestic abuse in the book. So the main character, one of the things that he would do is that in his society it was socially permitted to beat his wives, to essentially physically punish them, which to our society nowadays would be very vulgar and unseen. However, Achibi did make sure to provide nuance and context to the situation and his actions, where he actually discussed how they handled a traditionally domestically abusive situation, where a wife literally leaves her husband and their family refuses to let her come back to him. And so they're very explicit that they do not tolerate that type of abuse, even though I guess smacking or spanking, whatever you would want to call it, would be permitted. So there is a context, there's a difference to these two things that they see in this society. And so I'm glad that they provided that context themselves, because it at least helps explain sort of how the society views things, and that it is not purely abusive, I guess. I feel like you'd really need to read the book to understand the nuance of those two scenes, but that's getting on from the point. Basically, near the end of the book, that was basically the turning point, is when the colonizers essentially take over the town, or the village, whatever you want to call it, and they basically arrest all of the leaders, and so the perspective shifts from the main protagonist to this colonizer, who's basically just this pompous white asshole, and so he's twiddling his mustache, and he goes oh yeah, and he said that he's writing this book or something about these, oh, what was it? Basically and it was just some sort of insulting white men's burden ideology of them being savages or uncultured or something. And it's just an affront. It is incredibly insulting when you read how that man thinks, because you literally spent this entire book getting into the culture, getting into sort of just a society that is very robust, very deep and complicated. They have these stories and sports and oral histories and religion and family values and interpersonal relationships with other tribes, and there's all of this cultural shit that you've been dealing with day in and day out. You talk about how the seasons change, you talk about how the family structure works, you talk about the food and culture and cuisine and coming of age, and you have all of this different shit. And then this one guy is just yeah, no, them bitches just planted with sticks and rocks. And I'm just bitch, you an idiot. Like, and it's so, I think what Chibi really managed to do is he really managed to allow you to empathize and really understand his culture. And that's really nice because you don't always get that in a lot of historical fiction and a lot of other fiction because it's really just taken from a perspective only of your own. And so I think stuff like that, it really helped me just recontextualize colonialization in general. Because, I'm not really for it. Who would be in this day and age? It kind of sucks. Like, if there's one thing about America is we don't like colonies. Yeah, we try to have a few of our own, but, that didn't work out. So, I think it was, definitely a book I recommend anyone to read. It's one of those books that deserves to be kind of AP Lit. It's the type of thing that is very culturally valuable because it allows us to understand things outside of our perspective. So I'm going to move on just because I don't want to chat about each one for 50 hours each because this video will be super long. And let's move on to the next question. Though that's a really good book, you should check it out. Next question is, talk about a book that changed your opinion on a trope. So here you can do any trope. It can basically just be a way that they averted it or changed it that would be really ingenious or interesting or new. And that can be any sort of a version. Or sort of the way that I envisioned it, more than just a trope, but really a genre convention. If you're really tired of reading a certain genre, like a really niche genre, because it has become formulaic and everyone writes the same way. Think about how 90s rom-coms have a formula, or how a lot of romance books have a formula, or how a lot of, I'm trying to think of, other genres besides romance that are formulaic. But, if you read enough genres, you'll definitely start to realize, if you read enough books in the genre, rather, you'll start to realize that, a lot of tropes and structures are repeated. And that's for a variety of reasons that we're not going to get into. And so basically, for this question, you need to choose a book or a series or something like that deals with a genre or a trope a lot differently and really helps reinvent it for you. It makes it fresh for you. So what I chose was the Ugly series by Scott Westerfeld. And if you don't know, Scott Westerfeld, the Ugly series, is a young adult dystopian novel series. And so think Divergent, Hunger Games, I think it's called Match. There's all of those books that have the chicks and the glass balls or something. I only read the first 50 pages when I was in high school. But basically, it's one of those types of settings where you have the plain Jane, brown-haired, boring, female protagonist. She has a bunch of dudes who want to slide into her DMs, and she has to take down the oppressive dystopian government by being hashtag not like other girls. And a lot of the times, it can be good, it can be bad, and it's usually due to world building and just how annoying the love triangle is. So, most of the time, some of the issues I have with young adult dystopian novels is the love triangle. I like love triangles. I love when people are, fighting over each other because that's hot, and we all like that most of the time. The only issue when it comes to stuff like that is usually there's a clear, main bitch that she's going to get with at the end of the book, and then there's a bunch of, beta male orbiters in the book that are, kind of hot, but, they're boring white bread people. And it's honey, just date your best friend, forget about all these soy boys you met 5 days yesterday just because they're the leader of the resistance and they drive a Harley. Doesn't mean you should sleep with them. It's called an emotional connection, sweetie. This is not a hard situation. Just stop being just choose a lane, okay, sweetheart? And so that's one of the issues I have with dystopian novels is love triangle mostly. It's just, the characterization never makes sense. I'm thinking, just fuck your best friend. There you go. All dystopian love conflicts are solved, because that's usually how it goes anyway. The reason why I liked Uglies, however, is because they did have that setup, and you're thinking, oh, fine, we're going to do this now, and it's going to be whatever. But as you keep reading, it's actually a lot more nuanced. So Scott Westerfeld And I'm going to start talking about this in sort of generalizations. I'm going to actually get into the plot now. I'm going to summarize it for you. Sorry about that. Pretty much, the whole story is this, like, yeah, she's this plain Jane lady, but she is one of the uglies, because it's a caste society. And basically, the uglies are just normal. And so she's literally just super normal, right? Like, that is literally part of her, like, characterization. And on her 18th birthday, she goes from being an ugly piece of shit to being a hot Barbie supermodel. Literally, called a pretty. And so she's like, yes, I want to be super hot and have my coming of age where I get double D tits and a face full of Botox, and that's going to be my life. And so pretty much the entire society is centered around reimagining people to be these perfect idealized Adonises, and whatever the chick version of Adonis is, societies. And it's all plaster and it's all very plastic. And so basically she's going along and she realizes that, like, hey, that's kind of fucked up. And also, like, it's all sort of a Stepford wife type thing. And I'm trying not to spoil it for you, and there's a lot more to the story than that. But so basically she's dealing with that, and she's like, well, I don't want to be a Stepford wife. But how am I going to do it? And so Uglies basically sets her up. It makes her understand the context of the world she's in. The veil is lifted away, and she understands that the world is not as great as it is. But then, she still has to become a pretty at the end of the first book. Which I think is really interesting, that she doesn't instantly become this counterculture. She gets into it, but she doesn't but she does have to conform to society at the end of the first book. And that actually is part of the conflict she has at the beginning of the second book. So it continues into the series, while also showing you each step of the society that she lives in. Another thing about it was actually how they dealt with the love triangle. Usually, when I'm reading a young adult dystopian novel, it is very cut and dried. I'm usually like, Team Jacob or Team Gale or whatever the fuck it is, and I'm just like, okay, I'm just gonna pick one. Peter's a soy boy. Stop fucking him, Katniss. It doesn't matter. Like, grow a liver. And so, and that's usually how it is throughout the thing. I'm just like, this is kind of who I'm, rooting for her to sleep with, and I don't care about all of these other guys, because, you just met them, and why should I care about, that they want to slide into your DMs? Get away from that thirst honey and get an emotional connection, right? But basically, one thing I loved was that she didn't end up, getting with her best friend. And she didn't end up getting with, anyone in the first book at all. She had love interests, but she also lost love interest throughout the book, and she actually lost friends and all these other things, that her interactions with people weren't as black as white. The person she thought she loved turned out to be a piece of shit. The person that she also was kind of into, had more depth to her, but there's also stuff that she was wary of. And so it's really interesting because it isn't so cut and dried of a love triangle. It has conflict, and that actually helps propel the plot. It isn't like, sorry honey, I can't go on that dinner date with you. I have to overthrow the government at 7. It was like, no, oh hey, my actions have personal, what am I trying to say? My actions have personal consequences that affect my social life. And my social life is dictated by the political and, societal beliefs of my friends and family members. And so it felt in-depth, it felt fleshed out, that these weren't just some random fuckboys that were sliding into her DMs. These were actually people that she liked that had something to do with the plot. They were integral to the plot. They meant something besides, oh my goodness, should I sleep with the resistance leader? Or the other guy who's part of the Imperial Guard? No, they were just like, oh hey, my guy is arresting me for being a protester because this is a dystopian society, and maybe I shouldn't sleep with him because he's kind of on the wrong side. It's shit like that. And pretty much the Ugly Pretty series is just, it's great because it takes a dystopian novel, but it averts and it puts more in depth a lot of the tropes that make young adult dystopian novels really enjoyable, while also keeping it fresh, actually utilizing the tropes in an interesting and dynamic way. If you are just so sick of young adult dystopian novels, and you're like, oh wow, another basic brown-haired girl who thinks that tattoos are character development. Yes, I'm shitting on Divergent. Divergent fucking sucks. then read Uglies by Scott Westerfield, and then read the 3 other books in that series. Because they're fucking great. Okay. Rant over. Getting on to question number 3, because it's going to be a super fucking long video. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just feeling myself and screaming about young adult dystopian novels, so we're having fun, okay? Number 3. Talk about a book that you enjoyed from a genre that you don't usually like. So pretty much, we all have genres that we're super not into. Let's be honest. Some people love sci-fi. Other people think that sci-fi is boring and they name drop things and they're nerdy. Some people love horror. Some people like, chickens and they don't like to be scared. Some people think romance is really boring because every single chick in it is the same and all of the smut reads exactly the same. And you're thinking, do women not have any other opinion on how they want to be banged? That's me, if you couldn't tell. And so, basically, for this one, you want to think about a genre that is not your favorite. And we all have genres that we don't like. Normally, I would probably think about, these are normally fiction that I'm discussing in this tag, but if you have a non-fiction sort of idea for this, definitely, that's fine. You're valid. Don't worry. So this one is a little bit similar to question number 3, but this one specifically is about a book that is from a genre that you don't normally like, but you actually surprisingly enjoyed it, if that makes sense. What I was going to pick, it can also be, if this helps, a book that you judged to be in a certain genre, but when you read it, you realized it had either more depth or it was actually from a different genre altogether. If that helps you. I chose Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants by Anne Brashers. Hopefully I pronounced your name correct, sweetie. And I was not expecting to enjoy Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. I believe the movie came out when I was in high school, and so it was in my cultural consciousness, the name. But I had never really heard of it or read it. And I had seen a lot of sort of teenage, young adult or chick lit type books. And so I was I had seen this in the library, but not really the type of my thing. I was mostly reading horror and classics, if we're being honest, because I'm a fucking nerd. And so I see it. It's just sitting along on the shelf right next to the Bradburys. And I'm thinking, I might as well read this. Maybe it's good, And so I open it up, and it's really surprising. And it was actually really great. So I was expecting Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants to be this really asinine, Pretty Little Liars style, just feel good chick lit, where it's a bunch of girls, they get together, they have their babysitter club, and they're like, oh my goodness, Tiffany, your hair is so soft, I love braiding it. And it's oh my goodness, Courtney, I just love how you talk about all the men that you like. And I was expecting it to be like that, and I'm just that sounds boring, right? Why would I care about women sharing pants? But I get into it, and what I realize about it is that, first of all, it is a coming-of-age young adult story. And it deals, a lot of things, dealing with your parents divorcing, or having your friend have cancer, or just, going to a new place, away from all of your friends and family. And I'm being a bit vague, but I'm going to try that again. Basically, there's 4 chicks, right? They all do shit over the summer, and they can't be together. And they're besties, so they feel like shit about it, right? One has to stay home, one goes up to Greece to visit their grandparents, one goes to... I don't remember what it's called. It's that little, fingerling potato-shaped, peninsula off of California. Don't know what that's called, I'll probably put it in editing. And the other one does something else. Oh yeah, she goes see her dad because he's getting married again, a whore or something. And they basically find out that they can all fit into a pair of jeans. And that sounds dumb, but apparently for a group of women, they say that it's apparently difficult, which I believe. I am not going to show somebody's ability to wear pants because, there's a lot of times the pants don't fit me. And so each of the different stories is told they all have the different conflicts, they're all going for different shit. But the pants are essentially a bridge narrative that allows them to sort of still communicate and support each other somehow. And so they'll send letters to each other and talk about what's going on, and they all sort of come to age, like, during this summer. And it's really well written, and it deals with, like, so many different subjects in so much depth than I was really expecting it to for the storyline. Really, one thing it reminds me of is some of the young adult that I read when I was younger. Which, it feels weird that, like, I read young adult when I was younger and I guess a bit more older in high school. But that's just how life works, It actually reminded me a lot of the... if you ever read Paul Zindel, he was a young adult author in, like, the 80s and 90s. And pretty much most of his books included two things, and those were daddy issues and... let's see, parental surrogates who are old people that tragically die. I'm not even fucking joking. Like, many of his, like, character, like, he brings in old people, and they die, and it's sad. And you're like, basically, it's just a more emo Gordon Corman, and that's the best way to describe him. But yeah, basically, he reminded me a lot of Sister of the Traveling Pants, just because it really dealt with those, like, in-depth things, and it was a very realistic look on how those affect people, rather than, like, some young adult fiction where it's just like, oh my goodness, we just totally pranked teacher Mr. Johnson. I bet he gets to go home to his empty house and cry about how his wife left him for another man. But, yeah, no, Sister of the Traveling Pants was just really, it was a great book. And I actually really enjoyed it, because I don't usually like, sort of, like, books targeted towards, like, young girls, anything like that, either. So, moving on, question number 4 is, talk about an author who made you change your mind about a genre. So, as I said, I'm super not into romance most of the time. And it's like, I get it, and not to be, like, stereotypical, but, like, I am a guy. I feel that most romance is written for a female-centric audience that is mostly told from a feminine perspective, and it's very heteronormative. So it's usually about a chick finding, like, a super hard, not like other boys do who show... Okay. Most, like, Harlequin romances kind of follow a pattern, if we're being honest. It's usually, hi, my name's Mildred Gunthor. I'm a 30-something hard-working businesswoman who does something high-class and middle-class, like advertisement or art. And I'm going to go to this little out-of-the-way town or cruise ship or someplace rural with this hot, hard-working man. And I'm going to meet a guy who's either super rich and super sexy or super middle-class and totally ripped. And I'm not going to deal with no middle-class fuckboys. I'm going to deal with someone who either works with their hand or has a shit ton of money and teaches me how to be fun and spontaneous. And usually, it's going to involve a bunch of things like my sister's children or a pub where I can meet fun locals who are Irish or Scottish or something like that. Like, so many, like, romance novels, at least the ones that I've, like, seen or, like, looked at or read small synopsises of, they do a lot of, like, hi, I, like, I work, it's all, like, a lot of it's, like, a Hallmark movie, and I hate it. Because I don't care about her sister's kids. I don't really care about this dude. Usually, like, the historical romances are better because they're at least interesting. They aren't dealing with some boring chick who's on, like, the plains of Scotland and, like, trying to find herself, she had a midlife crisis and, like, getting dicked down by some Scottish pubsman. Like, and it's just, most romance just doesn't serve me because the protagonist is boring. The love interest is usually just slightly less boring. Basically, the only characteristic is that the hot, they like children, and, like, the decent people. That's boring. Wow, I'm glad that, like, your dream guy is always the one you date. Like, no, like, where's the chemistry in that if they're both really decent people? Where are the flaws? Where are the things that, like, they have to work through? That's not a fun story. That's just you writing some, like, power fantasy about getting dicked down by a rich billionaire in the Cayman Islands. Nobody wants to read that. Well, lots of people want to read that, but I don't. So, that's when I stumbled upon Nora Roberts, who is horribly prolific. Like, it's like a Stephen King was just... It's like she saw Stephen King and it's just like, bitch, I can do better than that. And so she's published so many books. One series I actually love from her that actually actually allowed me to read romance for the first time and enjoy it was her, what's it called? Sign of Seven series. So it was a romance thriller. It was a romance supernatural thriller, okay? I'm trying to think about the best way to describe it because pretty much there's like these three bros, they're blood brothers, they're not related, but they're like, homies, OG. And every 7 years, the Hell's Mouth opens, everyone starts stabbing each other. It's like Silent Hill or whatever. I don't know, I never played the game, so roast me in the comments. And so it's like, wow, this sucks. We should probably figure out a way to, make sure the Hell's Mouth stops opening and defeat the curse and vanquish the evil and whatever. And so they're dealing with that, and I don't really remember how the chicks get into the books, but they do. And so basically there's these three different chicks and they arrive and they start helping them. And they're not friends. I don't remember if they were friends initially. I think they were basically all came in for different reasons and just sort of got wrapped up into this. And so pretty much and then just wow, this is super crazy. But there's also these hot dudes fighting demons. So let's get with the program. And so each book basically deals with one of the chicks, and but also tells it from the guy's perspective, which is refreshing. Whoa, a dude who's talking in a romance novel? I know. And that being said, yeah, there's a lot of male protagonists in novels, so it's nice that we have female voices. But that's not the point. Let's shut up about that and talk about people getting slammed while fighting demons. And so basically, and they're all dealing things, and so it's nice because they actually deal with the dude's issues, and it's one guy's hey, I have a gambling problem and I'm bad with commitment and I don't know if you want this dick, and she's just honey, we can deal with that when it comes. Go to GA and let me get on it. And so they do, and so one half of the story is actually dealing with this supernatural conflict where they're trying to save the town and not create hell on earth every 7 years. But the other half of it is basically this women trying to slide into the men's DMs and hop on that D. And it's fucking great because the characters are interesting. The dynamics are interesting. And the scenes where they smash. That's fun. It is. Nora Roberts actually has interesting things. And it's fun. It's sexy. It's a little bit smutty. But it's not either a super. But it's never in some boring mission way. Which is kind of the problem with romance, is that, when you do read 500 pages of pulp, and you do get to that, one, juicy scene where you're oh, it's boring. They have a little bit of foreplay, they suck at a titty, she comes 3 times, and it's why the fuck did I read this book? That was unsatisfying. I've literally written, and it's just and you're unsatisfied with it. But Robert's just yeah, it's not overly explicit, it's not erotica, but you still get this fun little sultry pieces in there where it actually makes sense for the characters and they actually seem to enjoy themselves, and it's not this weird little touch me, make me feel something type thing. It's wow, I like you, this is enjoyable, this is something we're going to be doing off screen a lot when the readers aren't watching you slay that demon, and it's actually a interesting story. It's a good story, and then there's dicking down, which is how all romance should be in my opinion. I'm just saying. Instead of it just being, oh, why won't this guy sleep with me? And wow, he's so good with kids. It's no, something's happening, then you get dick. Like a good date. Anyway, moving on, I'm going to stop being explicit about Nora Roberts and how she can definitely get her characters to get it. And move on to the 5th question. This is the 5th and final question. Choose a book where your opinion about a character changed. So, that's pretty straightforward. Any book probably needs to be fiction, but I mean, if you had a biography where that works, honey, go and do it. You get it. Nora Roberts characters. I'm getting off that. Okay. So I mentioned it, earlier in my vlogs or whatever. Who cares? Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. So like I said before in the review, basically you start off and it's I'm dead. Not dead. Technically dead. To be soon missing. I don't even remember what the line was. Go watch the video. And so it's wow, this is a bad bitch. She framed her husband for murder. She gets shit done. She's a strong, independent woman. But then you keep reading and you're thinking, I hate to say it, honey, but she's kind of you kind of realize that she's not so much as a bad bitch, but as, like, really just, like, a bitch in general. Like, there, and so, like, the more you're, like, listening to Amy, you're like, it basically just, like, on the term bitch to define women, it goes down. It goes from, you a bad bitch, you get this done, boss babe, to this bitch crazy. Like, and I'm not trying to degrade her in any way, but basically she's vindictive. She's narcissistic. She's pessimistic. She's just all of these different things. And yeah, a lot of the characters are shit in that book. They have their own agendas. They all have this shit that just makes them crap human beings. But by far, Amy is just, the way that your view of her changes throughout the book is so powerful. She goes from being this victim to being this antagonist. And it's such a fantastic change. It's just a fantastic turn of pace that it really, I'm trying to find words to describe it. It's just the characterization, the way her actions, all throughout the book definitely give you a different opinion than what you initially have in the book. And that's important because Gillian Flynn is playing with your assumptions and your biases of the genre. We all want to, like, support the woman who leaves her cheating husband. We all want to have that Rosie O'Donnell she-devil moment where she's finessing on that bitch and making him pay for his fuck-ups. But then you're watching this again and you realize there's also a lot of more context to it. And that even though Amy's, like, living this power fantasy, making Nick eat his shit, she is not a good person, and she should not be idolized, just as you shouldn't idolize Rorschach or the Joker or the dude from Catching the Rye, because apparently some people are, like, really into him for some reason. I like Catching the Rye, but that's just Scott Caulfield? I don't remember. But, like, I hear, like, a lot of people, like, no, in that sort of context. And so, basically, Amy just becomes, I'm trying to think. So, a little comparison for you internet historians out there. Basically, I think Amy from Gone Girls is essentially the female comparison to how nice guys idolize Joker. And the first time I heard about Gone Girl, it was in, like, one of those nice girl videos where she's like, Amy's a bad bitch and we all need to burn our man's house down and teach them they don't fuck with no pussy. And that's a really toxic mindset to have. And Amy is a really toxic person. Both Amy and Nick are both very toxic people, and they say that in the book. They literally say, we're super toxic, we should not be married. And she's just like, no, honey, I'm going to put a baby in me. Oh, spoilers. And so it's like, basically, your opinion of Amy changes throughout the book, and it's powerful because it's such a version of the tropes we're used to. It's so much a different telling of a story that we thought we knew, but Gillian Flynn wanted to make sure that we thought about it differently. And I think that's, I'm getting a little off topic here, but I think that is really a great point when we talk about the feminist overtones in the book, just because they do talk about the Nancy Grace effect, and how, like, the husband's always guilty. And that's part of the feminism. There is a side where it's not constantly, men suck, women are great, how dare you speak, you chauvinist pig. There's a thing where it's like, yeah, at the same time, this is a bias. This is sexism on the other end of the scale. And yeah, while it might often be valid, there's also cases where we are much too quick to judge. And so I think that's really great because it definitely shows it shows you a contrast to a narrative that we think that we always know. And so it's a very powerful book in the sense that it's telling a different story than we're expecting, while also just having really interesting plot and really interesting characterization. So that was my new perspective tags. So stop now and come and collect it because we're going to get down for new perspective, guys. And I really hope you enjoyed that. I had a lot of fun chatting about, like, these books. Obviously, they're all ones that, like, I have some opinions on, so it's like, oh my goodness, is that why I do a video on it or something? Whatever. Sorry, guys. And so I had, like, a lot of fun talking to you about it. If you guys want to, I'm going to tag, this is a tag video, as I said, so I'm going to tag anyone who wants to fucking do this. Not because I, like, want, I don't know, clicks or something, whatever. Excuse me. But yeah, like, if you thought this was a fun tag, totally do it. I want to, like, hear from you. Like, leave a comment. Like, say, hey, I did this, so I can, like, check you out, and we can become, like, friends or something. I don't know. And we can just have fun with it. Did you like this tag? Do you have any tag that you want me to try? Because, like, I enjoy this. I like doing tags. And it's kind of sad because I don't, like, have a bunch of physical books right now for me to, like, flash to the camera. I'm actually going to look and see if I own any of the books I've mentioned. I do not! Anyway, yeah, so, like, I don't really have, like, a lot of physical copies of books, but I have read a lot of books. So, I would love to do some more tags, and it would just be a fun time for all. And guys, just remember, as always, you can like this video because it lets me know how I'm doing. You can comment down below, comment your answers to this tag, comment if you've done this tag in your own video, that type of thing. And of course, you can share this. Like, definitely, please share this. This was so much fun to make. And if you have a friend out there who likes BookTube, if you have a friend out there who, like, likes to watch some guy, like, Method Oregon, talk about books for, like, 40 minutes, I'm your bitch, don't worry. And yeah, it's like, like, help me grow my platform and be there for me. Because I'm making content for you guys, so what can really help me out is just for you to help, let people know, hey, what's this guy doing on the internet? You should talk to him. He's sad and lonely, and I need friends. And I need to stop switching tenses all the time. Anyway, guys, I had a lot of fun. I have a bunch of editing to do, and I want to be a productive person instead of just, like, laying about playing Minecraft. The server was on, like, went away for some reason, so that's kind of sad because I was going to, like, show you, but whatever. And, yeah. Anyway, guys, this is False Bulls 123, and I'm signing off.